Okay, everybody, we are officially live on both platforms, Instagram and Facebook. If you could let me know on Facebook if you can hear me, because that was the trouble yesterday during the start of Mercury retrograde. Um, but I have apparently figured out the issues. Google Chrome apparently doesn't like me simulcasting the Zoom window and Facebook anymore, even though I've been doing it for the past 3 months with no problem. So anyway, tech issues aside, welcome back. We are here to do the charts that we were supposed to do yesterday, but nobody could hear me. So again, for those of you logging on, just let me know you can hear me. Yes, perfect. Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate it. Tested it this morning, but always nice to get good feedback. Um, we have 5 charts. We are going to be looking over those as a excuse me, as a just FYI to anybody who's watching the recording or who would like to be a part of the live stream, all you need to do is private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I will add you to the list. The list is long, but I will message you when your chart is featured, and we will put you on the live stream as well. And if you would like to learn astrology or work one-on-one on your chart, we can always schedule a private consult through my website, ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. I also have a bunch of online classes, one of which is Planetary Altars, coming up on the 25th of October. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull up our first chart. So our first chart is Mariana. Cheers, my darling. How are you? So I do have the benefit of, at least with these first 2 charts, because I got through the first 2 before I realized that the sound issues were teching me out yesterday. And this chart we're going to need to walk through just a little bit slower. It's going to be a little bit more of a heavier pace first thing in the morning. So we'll just kind of tone down the mood a little bit. First things first, we have a Gemini ascendant, right? Gemini is over here at 23 degrees, rising in the first house of self. That does bring that Gemini quality to the surface. It does bring a high level of intellect, curiosity, mental power, and prowess. It does bring the ability to be flexible, mutable, adaptable. Yeah, all those characteristics. Somewhat of a chameleon, Gemini is. But as we have a sign on the ascendant, that sign also gives us the ruler of the chart. And where that ruler of the chart is placed is also very significant to the person in question before we get to the sun or the moon sign, which is very, very important in this chart for other reasons. So here we have Gemini on the ascendant making Mercury the ruler of the chart. Mercury is over here in Sagittarius retrograde, in the 7th house of relationships. So to put the ruler of the chart in the 7th house of relationships, it really does emphasize the importance of what you feel is a requirement in terms of having relationships in your experience. Now, whether or not those relationships are helpful, whether or not those relationships are ideal for you, we do have Mercury in retrograde, going backwards in the skies at 0 degrees, just about to move back into Scorpio. So it seems like there might be an issue with repeated patterns, miscommunication, especially earlier in life before the chart gets a chance to mature. One of the things that I get questioned a lot with astrology is, are these things and traits and qualities that we'll be stuck with for the rest of our lives? And I say absolutely not. You can nourish the strong things, but then also help the weak things to grow, or plant new things. There are so many options in a chart, and there are so many options in life, and it's not necessarily about succumbing to your weaknesses and just saying, oh, well, that's a weak spot, it'll always be there. It's really about nourishing, especially in this chart, relationship communication. So that's the first thing to kind of delve into. Then we have to unpack the Scorpio stellium. in the chart. And fortunately, but unfortunately, everything in this chart is really about that Scorpio stellium. We do have family drama, we do have that on the side, but it really doesn't even hold a candle to what we're about to unpack in the sixth house, which is just the very meaty center of this chart. So we have the south node, we have the sun, we have Venus, we have the moon, and we have Neptune all in Scorpio. What makes this even more interesting is the sun is conjoining Venus. Venus is in Cazimi, what's known as in the heart of the sun, in Scorpio. So that doubles down on Venus's presence. It really backlights her and really shares her story very brightly in the chart. The moon is also conjoining Neptune at 21 degrees, applying to that conjunction. So we have a very interesting dynamic here happening within the sixth house, but also with the personal planets. The sixth house is the house of work, health, and pets. Yeah. I know pets kind of throws people for a ringer, but it is the house of our animal friends, right? The work association really does bring in some very interesting dynamics with these strong Scorpio placements. The Venus in Scorpio being so backlit by the sun does bring a particular archetype to mind, and that is the Medusa archetype, as well as the Persephone archetype, and several other myths that I'll kind of throw out as we go forward. But the idea of the feminine who has been traumatized. And when we look at Venus in Scorpio opposing her natural rulership of Taurus, this is a fall for Venus. This is one of her least favorite signs to be in. I've heard one of my favorite astrologers, Austin Kopek, talk about Venus in Scorpio as the queen of the sewers. The queen who was exalted, but she was overthrown by her kingdom, and so she's forced to live her life underground, and she becomes queen of a new domain. And that's very much the idea of the Medusa as well. The idea that she was once beautiful, she was once loved by a god, but because of the jealousy of the divine powers, she was unrightfully so smote, and turned ugly and interestingly enough, powerful, but terribly disfigured by no fault of her own. So I think that what we need to understand about the sixth house of work and health and that Venus placement being so strong is that archetype of the wounded Venus is going to come into play in the work dynamic, in the health dynamic, and there might be some working with battered women. There might be some working with victims, working with abusers, especially when we think of Scorpio being kind of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We have all these kind of underworld topics, all of these grunge topics that are coming forward, all these punk topics that are coming forward with Scorpio. And the moon also attaching so closely to Neptune, who is known, when I see Neptune in Scorpio in any chart, really, I see it as an addiction aspect. And when there are so many strong aspects like the moon applying to conjoin it, the idea that you may surround yourself in your work environment with people who are physically and or emotionally addicted to certain people, places, things. Yeah. So that's something to be aware of. And those Scorpio placements really do speak towards not just healing a story in your own life, but also healing a story in the lives of others. Because there's, like, we could talk about the other dynamics in the chart. We could talk about the Saturn opposition to Uranus. We could talk about the Mars and Virgo ruling the sixth. But the fact that you've stamped Venus and Scorpio into the heart of the sun, the fact that the moon is applying to Neptune and Scorpio, literally not even a degree away, that level of precision in the planetary schemes is very, very rare. And you've decided to come into the world at a time and with a particular alignment that I think is super fascinating, but also very deeply personal. And pair that with your North Node in Taurus, ruled by that Venus in the heart of the Sun, who's in the 12th house of karmic healing. Like, I think one of the big things in your chart, my dear, is for you to overcome, your own Medusa archetype. You partner with that kind of dark goddess, that Persephone energy, who has had to go down to the underworld, who has had to descend, in order to claim power, and then while in the underworld is able to kind of chauffeur or create, almost like we could think of like an underground railroad, right? We could think of this divine figure who has been in some ways scarred or cursed, or at least divinely unfavored, who is then able to, through the scars, through the curses, through the divine disfavorment, journey or get a free pass to the place where she can then rescue others from their own torment. And I think that that's a beautiful example of what your chart is kind of asking you to do. So we could talk about money, we could talk about love, we could talk about all of this other superficial nonsense bullshit, all these other things that society tells us that are important to focus on. But what I'm telling you from an astrological standpoint is, if you don't learn how to partner with these Scorpio placements, if you don't embrace these archetypes, if you don't channel these effectively and carefully, mind you, it is like holding a scorpion or a poisonous snake. They are absolutely gorgeous creatures, but they are still deadly as hell, and they will sting you without a moment's notice if they sense fear, hesitation, or anything that might be threatening to them. So it really does take a deep level of partnership to master these topics. And if you don't have the master, then that's really where I would push you to go from here. So yeah, that's kind of where we're gonna stop the unpacking of this chart, because it is the blessing of this chart is because we have such powerful placements packed within a short window of the chart. We could go into the nuances, we could break it apart, we could challenge it and tease it and play with some of the superficial stuff just for entertainment purposes. But when it comes to the work that I do, like, I'm here to help clients move forward and really understand the biggest rocks that they need to tackle in their lives, and that's the biggest rock. So if you learn how to move that, everything else is just going to be chump change. You'll be fine. Hello, Berserker08 on Instagram. Wavin, love it. Let's just double check the comments, make sure everybody, yep, I can hear you, I can hear you. Fabulous. It looks like we are getting some comments rolling. That was not the case yesterday. So glad to see that. Okay, chart number 2. Let's talk about Teresa. Miss Teresa, how are you? Cheers. Mother Teresa. It's is more like it. Yeah, I remember these placements from yesterday. So funny. Like, so when we see a Libra ascendant and Sun in Libra in the first house, like, it's just like the grace of Libra comes forward and just sugarcoats the chart. It could be a very pleasant face, it could be a very endearing personality, it could be a combination of both. Everybody in my life who has prominent Libra placements is just super. When I say the word attractive, I don't necessarily mean sexually. What I mean is just there's a beauty about them, and that's part of Libra being ruled by Venus, right? There's a balance, there's a symmetry, there's a grace to anybody who has strong Libra placements in the chart. And to have both the Sun and the Ascendant in the first house in Libra is pretty nice. We will get to the heartache. We will get to the heartache of the chart, but not yet. Let's continue to talk about some fun things. So the moon is up in Taurus in the 8th house of business, death, taxes, estates, all really fun stuff. But when we have the moon in Taurus, which is the fixed earth sign, it's a very financially stable sign. I like it a lot. I enjoy this placement because it really, really tells me that there's a good sense of entrepreneurship and community gathering. There's an understanding of how money kind of works, how the system kind of works, an understanding of the rules that can both be, that need to be abided by, but also can be broken or bent. Yeah, I like that. And the sun and the ascendant, as well as the moon, although moon is in Taurus, it's still a Venus ruled sign. So Venus is not just the ruler of the chart, Venus is the ruler of the life. Like, of the sun ascendant moon combo, Venus rules all of them. Like, if you're not already working with Venus or the divine feminine, I would be shocked. I would be shocked, because she's been knocking at your door for quite a long time. Um, and it's not just any Venus that you have in your chart. You have Venus in Leo in the 11th house of friendships, social groups, um, and community gatherings. It's such a flamboyant Venus. It's such a socially active Venus. It's such a dramatic Venus. It's a party Venus. It's a just a really nice complement to your solar and lunar and ascendant placements. I really enjoy it. Um, and I think that the natural charisma that you have is operating at an extremely high level. Um, like you may have noticed this more than one time in your life, like just the grease that tends to come from the divine and just makes the wheels super squeaky. The luck that just happens out of nowhere, the gifts that just appear out of nowhere. Venus is very fond for those that she has blessed to just constantly let them receive unexpected bounty. And so I'm sure that's happened to you on many, many different occasions. Um, so yeah, that's the fun part of the chart. So I'm adoring that right now. But with the sweets come the sours. And so we do need to have a rather intense conversation about this Mars opposition. So we have the sun at 5 degrees of Libra in the first house. Now, the sun in Libra is technically in the sign of his detriment, because the sun is exalted in Aries. Aries is the sun's favorite sign. Um, but Libra is the opposite sign from Aries. And when a planet is in the opposite sign of their exaltation, they're at their weakest point. When we think of when the sun moves into Libra, it's literally during the fall equinox. It's literally when the sun starts to lose its light, as opposed to the spring equinox, when the sun starts to gain its light back. And so the planet's exaltation and detriment, in this case, the sun is starting to weaken. Yeah, the sun is starting to fade. Um, and so the sun is not necessarily in its greatest position right now. And that sun is also being hurled a gigantic fireball by Mars at 5 degrees exactly. At 5 degrees exactly. Mars in Aries retrograde in the 7th house. So there are a couple ways that we could define this. And again, when I speak with clients about possibilities in their chart, there are astrology books that can say, this is what I've seen, this is how we define this, or this is how this particular formation has shown up in the lives of others. But every case is unique, every case is different. So I'm going to describe some of the archetypal energies, and we'll kind of put together possible case scenarios. But also I'll give you kind of best case, worst case, and we'll see kind of how you've been able to channel that, right? So Mars in Aries is the archetype of the warrior leader. Yeah. Mars is aggressive, fiery, combative, really productive at his best, hyper-focused, always moving forward, very rah-rah cheerleader, battle cries, sharp objects, spill little blood, cut here, cut there, perfectly fine. Um, But remember that this is Mars retrograde. So Mars is going backwards. He's at the slowest point of his synodal cycle. And to make matters worse, we actually just had this exact opposition at like 21 degrees of Sun in Libra, Mars in Aries retrograde. So you recently got hit really hard relationship wise. Like it triggered a lot of old stuff for you, like old stuff. So we need to kind of be aware that that whole thing is happening. Um, so that Mars in Aries, which would naturally be all about moving forward, is kind of hitting a slump. Mars is no longer feeling the desire, the drive to move, to engage, to act. Right? He's retrograde. He's going backwards. He's too slow, and is also opposing the sun, our source of light and joy and self confidence and self esteem. So when we have this Mars, who's kind of like a warrior with a pot belly sitting on the couch thinking about the good old days, right? Maybe drinking a little bit too much, um, maybe with some battle wounds, battle scars. And then this Sun in Libra, which is all about kind of peace and justice and, fighting for balance and making sure that both sides win and everybody's having a good time and they just love to play the peacekeeper, right? Um, that Mars gets really resentful of the Sun who wants to take both sides, and that Sun who only wants balance and justice for all gets really mad at Mars for picking a side that is a little bit more violent and then sitting on their butt because they feel like they've done their work even though justice has not been served. Yeah. And this is all happening between your first house of self, where your Sun is, and your seventh house of relationships, where your Mars is. This opposition is pretty fierce. It's pretty intense. I'm not going to lie. And so when we look at this being in your seventh house of relationships with this Mars, this could be you being attracted to spouses who have repressed anger issues, who have a desire and a will to act, but who act out in wrong ways, or who cannot channel their action potential very well. This could also be physical things like impotence, or erectile dysfunction. This could be anything where we would think of that Mars young principle. Yeah, that activity, that heat, that fire, that engagement, that being slowed down or retrograde. That's kind of the energy that we're seeing, and that directly conflicts with your Sun, who really just wants to make sure that everybody's having a good time. So that can manifest in many, many different ways. And that's something that we kind of need to be aware of in the chart. Because when shit like this hits home, there's no amount of your charisma that will be able to revive that Mars. And that's the tricky bit, is the one area that you can't touch is the most sensitive area for you. And it doesn't matter how blessed you are by Venus, because Mars is the problem. Yeah. And for that, we would need to do things like Mars remediation. We would need you to get in touch with the divine masculine. We would need you to do things that are a little bit more reparative of that active force, because he's really the one that needs your assistance. You've already been blessed by Venus. She's already here in droves, but Mars as a force in your chart, especially as a force who's ruling and frankly wreaking havoc in your seventh house of relationships, that's the tricky business. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's kind of where we need to stop with this chart. Um, could go deeper, but I think again with these first two charts, the big thing is we had a major cluster in a particular sign with very important aspects, and then here we have this opposition, which is really kind of the core heartstring of the chart. So as long as we pay attention to that, everything else will start to work itself out. Okay. Just checking in, making sure that everybody's doing good. Just taking a peek at the comments, making sure they're going through. Absolutely. Hairdresser Mblex today. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Very fortunate. Blessed continuously. Yep, show did. Nail on the head with partners. Yep, so true. Fabulous. Yes, excellent. So yeah, just keep doing that. So glad that you enjoyed it, Teresa. Okay, let's keep moving on. Okay, Shania, my dear, how are you? Cheers. Let's take a peek at your chart. Ooh, no. Ooh, you're making me nervous. You're making me nervous. Ooh, girl, no, no, no. You're making me nervous. Your ascendant is at 29 degrees, 59 clicks in, literally, literally a minute or two. If you are not 159% sure about your birth time at 2:41 p.m., this reading will make no goddamn sense. That ascendant is what keeps astrologers up at night, because that is too close for comfort. Oh my god. Oh my god. I've only gotten one other client with a chart like that. Ooh, making me nervous. Ooh, that is so unsettling. So unsettling. Because and this is why exact birth times are important, and why when I do these all calls, people will say, "Oh, well, I don't know my exact birth time." I'm like, tough shit. Because astrology, one of the weaknesses of astrology is that it is time-based. It is time-sensitive, very much so. I just added a couple names to the list who are twins, and they were only born 10 minutes apart, but within those 10 minutes, the charts totally changed. Yeah? So it is very, very important to dissect a chart as precisely as possible with a timestamp. And ooh, if this reading does not make sense, please let me know. We'll redo the chart. We'll play with it. We might need to schedule a private session, just a quick one, to kind of talk about what the implications are of both charts. But anyway, ooh, chills. Okay, but anyway, we'll read it as if it's an Aquarius ascendant. So, Aquarius ascendant. Aquarius is the fixed air sign of the zodiac, known for its genius. Whenever I see Aquarius, I always think kind of Albert Einstein with the crazy hair. Beautiful mind, also terrible speaker. Not really a good human. Not that he was a bad person, but he just wasn't good at peopling. He just wasn't good at humaning. And that's kind of what Aquarius is. It's the eagle that kind of soars above it all. It's the fixed air current that is of the intellectual realm and descends very rarely to humankind to bestow gifts of knowledge, only to reascend and to not be seen again for years. And that's kind of Aquarius, is that socially distanced genius on the outskirts of the wood that some people only catch glimpses of. So that's part of your personality. In this chart, we have the Lord of the chart being, Saturn in Cancer retrograde in the 6th house of work. Well, that's a shame. So Saturn in his fall of Cancer, opposing his natural rulership of Capricorn, and retrograde, so that's a double hit to Saturn's strength. It does make you really, really focused on the 6th house aspects of work, health, and pets, but it also screws up. That aspect of your chart, because that Saturn, Saturn is Lord of restriction. Saturn is the karmic force, the teacher. Saturn is the one that we turn to learn the lesson, sometimes a harsh lesson for all of us kind of working through our Capricorn stuff over the past year and a half with all these nasty transits. But when we put Saturn, everything that is cold and dry and dark and withering, in Cancer, the watery, mothering, squishy, nurturing energy, those two energies don't mix. Those two energies don't mix. And so it's kind of like a half reconstituted dried up mushroom who's just soggy and misplaced. Um, and then on all of that backwards as well. So the Saturn needs some help, and because of that, the sixth house of work, health, and pets also needs some help. And I would really maybe encourage some Saturn remediation, and honoring Saturn in your life a little bit more prevalently. That would have gotten better around 30 with your first Saturn return, and will continue to get better around 60 with your second Saturn return. Um, but but that Saturn is still pretty weak, pretty weak. So that's the first aspect of the chart that kind of needs to be understood. We've got a 0-degree moon in Gemini in the 5th. Gives you a little bit of a creative edge. I like it. Finances are pretty good. Jupiter in Pisces retrograde. Although it is retrograde, it's still a Jupiter in Pisces, you know, Lord of Abundance in his home sign of Pisces in the second house of wealth. You could do a lot worse. I like that. I like it a lot. Blessed by the Lord of Abundance. Let's see, another Venus in Scorpio. This time she's combust the sun. That's absolutely horrid. Ooh. Okay, so here's where the crux of the chart starts to fall out for us. Yeah. Okay, we're getting to the meat of it. So we have Mars in Scorpio. Mars in Scorpio up in the 10th. Venus in Scorpio up in the 10th. Sun in Scorpio up in the 10th. Mars in Scorpio is that archetype of the ninja, you know, the warrior who is clouded in, or who is shrouded in shadow, who throws sharp objects from unseen places and assassinates victims, right? In the 10th house of success and fame. That Mars is also ruling your 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication. So becoming famous for your writings, your teachings, your communication style. Often going to be something to look forward to. If you're not already writing, teaching, speaking, I would highly recommend it. But we do have this detrimental Venus. And like we said before in the first chart, you know, Venus in Scorpio is the queen who has been cast out and cast down into the sewers. You know, she was on a throne and excuse me, she was on a throne, but now she has to create a new throne, like in the woods, under the sea, in the sewers, you know, a place that is unseen, deep, dark, dense. It's in a world that she is not familiar with. And because that Venus is so mistreated in your chart in the 10th house, and the ruler of your chart, and we have all this Saturn stuff, and I really think the divine feminine aspect in your chart kind of needs to be nurtured just a little bit. We're seeing a little bit too many sharp edges. We're seeing a little bit too, like I said, the chart itself is half constituted, right? It was dried and withered, and then as you've aged and matured, you're kind of blowing yourself back up. You're kind of reinvigorating yourself from that kind of dried out state. And I think that that's a good analogy for you to kind of think of as you start to kind of re-inject yourself into what it means to be who you are as a person. But that Venus, you know, that Venus definitely needs some help in the 10th house of success. You sacrificing your yin, your rest, your ability to be feminine, your ability to be quiet and still and meditative, and dark and comfortable, and everything that we would think of as that yin polarity is definitely compromised in your chart, and will continue to be compromised the more you're thrown into the spotlight. So that's something that needs to kind of be shifted around if you're not channeling those forces properly. And in this case, it's really, really viciously tempting because your Jupiter in Pisces is also ruling your North Node in the 11th house of friendships and social groups and philanthropic efforts. So you'll make more money the more you're in the spotlight, and the more you're surrounded by people, and the more you're surrounded by the places and things that are more public and more in the communities and the tribes in which you serve. But that's the exact place where you start to compromise your ability to be the opposite end of that young spectrum. Like, you know how to be active, you know how to work your butt off, you have an extremely important ritualistic work ethic, a very creative, active force that you're dealing with on a daily basis. But if you don't know how to complete that cycle with things like, naps, rest, um, just those things. That's going to be kind of hard for you. Also, that alone time, that cloistering, that ability to turn off the world, to move into a space that is uniquely your own, and to not necessarily worry about the opinions of others. Those are going to be important characteristics for you as a person to embrace, especially as you start to become more active career-wise. There's a good chance that you'll constantly be working with children and or working in the creative fields. Relationships, you'll be attracted to somebody who is actually naturally famous, who is rather well-to-do, although they hide it very well. Your sun in Scorpio is ruling your 7th house of relationships, so that kind of punky goth underworld archetype that is just so Scorpio, so deep and underground and slightly seedy, but only seedy because it's sensitive, it's guarding the treasures underneath the surface. And you're attracted to that, but you're also attracted to somebody who's in that spotlight, and that being somebody who you're naturally going to pull into your inner circle. Yeah, the healing professions would be important for you, although it's tricky. I'm not gonna lie, because you don't have that root foundation, that well-placed Cancer energy, that well-placed Venus. You have a moon in Gemini, but the moon in Gemini is being ruled by a Mercury retrograde in Libra. Like, it's too heady, it's too off. You don't have a strong enough moon, you don't have a strong enough Venus to really give you those mothering qualities that you would want in a healthcare provider. You might be a really good clinician, yeah, but the mothering aspect, the holding of space, the literal tenderness that we would want from somebody who's truly taking care of us, not just applying medical practice to us, that you might need to work on just a little bit. Yeah, I think that's pretty much about it. Okay, Shania, thank you so much for donating your chart. I very, very much appreciate it. Just make sure that everybody can, pretty sure about the time, but been told it is Pisces. Okay, yeah, it's 29, it's 29, it's 29.5, so we might need to redo that. Let me know if the chart says. Okay. Yeah. So if that reading did make sense to you, I would encourage you to kind of play with the idea of an Aquarius ascendant. If it didn't, then meh. Well, we can always redo it. But again, astrology and reading the chart is a practice of resonance, right? There have been many times where I have clients who they'll say that they got their birth time, from their birth certificate, and we're 15 minutes into the reading, and they're like, it just doesn't sound like me. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Let's tweak it. Let's play. Let's see. And in some cases, I've had to adjust an hour and a half off of a medically recorded birth certificate time. And then the whole session flows, and we start to unlock all of these aspects and these deep secrets, and we start pulling through all of this stuff, and it's like, wow. So it does definitely bring into some time sensitive things. Good. I'm glad. Perfect. Okay. Let's talk about Amanda. Amanda, how are you? Cheers. How are... Oh, Lord, girl. The Scorpio stellium, I was not prepared. I was not prepared at all. What? Y'all are ridiculous. I cannot with these charts. This group of 5, they are curveballs and a half. Y'all be taking me to the ends of the earth with these charts. Okay, so in the 11th house in Sagittarius, we have the midheaven, we have the sun in Sag, we have Uranus in Sag, we have South Node Sag, we have Jupiter Sag, we have Mercury Sag, we have Neptune Sag. That is a pretty heavy focus on the 11th house of friendships, community organizations and tribes, and the energy of Sagittarius. That's intense, Amanda. That's some pretty spunky firework energy coming for you from that Sagittarius influence. But I mean, I love it. With all this Sag energy, I really just wish you had. It would be a little bit much if you had Sag on the ascendant. It'd be a little bit much. But if you were born just a little bit later, a nice Pisces ascendant, put all of that Sag energy up in the 10th. Ooh, that would have been a blessed chart. Ooh, goodness. Anyway, so let's talk about you. Oh, another Aquarius ascendant. Okay. So we talked about Aquarius already as an ascendant. Aquarius tends to be the quirky one, the weird one, the intellectual one, the genius. Although the genius who can't really people or human very well. It tends to be the geek, the weirdo, the nerd, who comes up with the cure for cancer, but who can't, walk up to somebody at a bar and introduce themselves to save their life. So that's that kind of weird intellectual. I always think of Albert Einstein with Aquarius ascendants. That's that. The ruler of your chart is Saturn. Let's see where Saturn is. Saturn is up in Scorpio at 10 degrees in the 10th house of success. So Saturn in Scorpio from the 10th, what I find so interesting about this placement, and I've seen it on a couple charts, and definitely let me know what you think, Amanda, but Saturn is Lord of restriction, right? Saturn is Lord of less. Yeah? If you don't need it, throw it out. In fact, if you think you need it, but you really don't, I'm going to pry it from your bleeding hands. Like Saturn, if any of you need a clue as far as what Saturn energy feels like, it's been the past year and a half as Saturn has transited through Capricorn, making all sorts of havoc, as well as Jupiter and Pluto in Capricorn, like so much in Capricorn. That Cap energy is Saturn energy. So Saturn is Lord of less. And Scorpio is the sign of all things that are hidden and secretive. Yeah? So why, my dear, would you put the Lord of less in the sign of secrets in the 10th house of success and fame? I wonder, secretly, you want it, you desire it, you crave it. You want people to chase after you, and to adore you for your hidden talents, right? But on the surface, it's all about refusing those opportunities, saying, "Oh no, I could never." Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. And that's where Sag kicks in. Because Sag is all about playing the showboat. Sag is all about being dramatic. Sag is all about bringing that mutable fire energy all over every social situation and literally just vomiting sparkles and rainbows. And I personally can't take that energy. I personally am not a fan of like super Sag energy. Um, but I can appreciate it. Like it's great at a rave. High energy definitely has its place. And it's not just high energy that we're talking about here. We also have Uranus, which kind of electrically charges everything. We have Jupiter, Lord of Abundance and Expansion. Like, that's a very lucky placement to have in your chart. Like Jupiter and Sag in the 11th, your friends are going to be extremely influential and highly valuable, darling. Don't let them go, because they will have access to resources that you could only dream of. Dream of. Um, but also, um, the idea of your second house of finance also being ruled by Pisces, making Jupiter the lord of that house, you getting money from and or connections from friends as you continue to work in the community, in the environments of kind of social change. That's all going to be part of your aesthetic, part of your chart. So there's that, those two kind of contradicting energies. We also got that Mercury and Sagittarius, just that mind that goes in a billion directions. It's like your compass actually has 50 needles on it, and you can't figure out where north is. Yeah, that's a thing. Oh, but you've got a nice Venus in Libra. Oh, but you've got a Mars in Libra. Whenever Mars and Venus are co-present within the same sign, there's always going to be this idea of needing to balance or rectify gender identity. That could come through a sexuality perspective. That could come from a balancing yin and yang in terms of like activity and rest. In this case, we have the rest that's a little bit stronger. Venus is in Libra, her sign, whereas Mars is in Libra, his fall, because Venus and Mars don't really get along in each other's signs. So Mars is at his weakest, which makes your communication skills a little rough, honestly. Although you've got a quick wit and you can definitely spin the story just from charisma alone, and laugh it off because you've got a great sense of humor. When in doubt, tell a dirty joke. But true intellectual conversations, that's going to be tricky, because Mars is already in detriment, ruling your third house of communication. So that might need to be remediated if you actually get into a teaching position, or if you need to kind of like speak at a meeting. We would go to Mars to really make sure that you can heal that relationship with your voice. Relationship-wise, you're going to be interested in somebody who's also very socially gregarious, somebody who's constantly bouncing around and enjoying life to the fullest through the social groups and dynamics. So the more public you are, the more you're going to find your potential mates. But Leo is on the sign cusp of the 7th house. So we're looking for somebody who's a little bit more fixed, a little bit more ritualistic. When you interview this person on your first date, you're really looking for the answer to the question, so talk to me about a day in your life. Yeah, you want them to answer in this way. Well, I wake up about the same time every day. you know, get ready, get dressed. I go to my favorite coffee place. I always order the same thing. Go to work. Work consists of blah, blah, blah. Same time for lunch. Go to the bakery down the street or the Thai place down the street. Grab lunch. Go back. You know, home by 5. And then the evening is for friends and family and having fun. You know, but you want a certain level of consistency. You want a certain level of fixed or rigidness to counterbalance your mutable nature, because you need somebody who's a little bit grounding, but who can still keep up with you fire-wise. So Leo placements is what we're really looking for in a quality partner chart for you. Family, fabulous. Venus and Libra ruling the 4th house. Ruling the 4th house of family. Although it's possible that we have adoption in the family, although it's possible we do have long distance travel or parents are from a foreign country, because Venus is in the 9th house of foreigners. Also, you adopting your parents' spirituality, very, very hardcore. That could be a thing, at least initially. North Node in Gemini in the 5th, ruled by Mercury in Sag in the 11th. That's tricky. Tricky. What do we want to say about that? What do we want to say about that? Co-present with Jupiter. It's going to be really difficult for you to pull away from that social life. If you do decide to have a child, you know, that's going to be the biggest downside, is you needing to slow down because you won't be able to physically keep up. That's one of the curses of having an Aquarius ascendant, is the nervous system, the skin, the calves are sensitive. They are predisposed to a certain amount of stress and restless anxiety. Yeah. And when you start to activate your womb, your 6th house of health activates with Cancer on the cusp, which really brings forward a lot of your medical issues, and it's going to take a lot of self-care throughout a pregnancy, which will divide you from a lot of the social connections that you've made, unless they're extremely supportive of your process. But Sagittarius doesn't really like to be weighed down by heavy things. And as you literally start to get more heavy, both physically and mentally and emotionally, as you carry a child, that might be something to consider long term, is gradually shifting your friends to those who might be more supportive of your pregnancy process. Moon in Virgo in the 8th, ruled by that same Mercury in the 11th, does give you a great eye for business and government. Yeah, this is a great politics chart. This is a great politics chart. I would highly go into campaigning. That would be really successful for you. Yeah, the only thing that I would want to see more of is Libra. But you've got that Venus in Libra, and that's glorious. So, as an FYI, if you ever wanted to get into politics, you would totally smoke them. So we're going to cut her off there. But thank you, Amanda, for donating your chart to science. I hope that you enjoyed me rambling about your chart for 2 seconds. Yay, I'm wonderful. Oh, that stellium kicks my tail. My husband is a Virgo, Sun, Sag, rising. Perfect match. Okay, whatever. Both pregnancies had me in bed rest. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Like that. I've seen that. I've seen that exact transit, that exact kind of boom, boom, boom with the formations, and it's totally not pretty. But I'm glad that you survived. I'm glad that you're still here with us. And I'm so glad that you donated your chart to science. So thank you. Okay, last chart of the morning. Oh, goodness. I have been just talking everybody's ear off. We're almost at an hour. Ah! So Instagram's probably going to kick me off in a little bit, guys. I'm so sorry. But let's talk about Tanya. Tanya, dear. Another Aquarius ascendant? Really? Another Aquarius ascendant and stellium. Goodness gracious. Goodness gracious. That's tricky though. It's tricky. Tanya, dear. We have the need for a little bit of discussion. So, we've already talked about Aquarius a lot being on the ascendant because I think like 4 out of the 5 charts have had it, which is just ridiculous because I don't plan these things. But the Aquarius ascendant does bring that fixed air energy into the chart. It does bring intellect. It does bring the idea of a certain level of quirk or weirdness. People joke that all Aquarians are like aliens, and I agree with that to a certain extent. They're just aliens in people suits, but we need to respect that Aquarians just live in their heads a lot, and that's even more so the case for you because you also have Mercury in Aquarius in the first house. You have Mars and the Sun as well in Aquarius in the first house. That's some pretty strong Aquarius energy. Unfortunately, there are some things here that make that a little bit difficult or problematic. So your chart in the first house, this pileup of planets, is suffering from a traditional astrological term known as combustion. So, combustion is a term that dictates when any planet or planets or calculated points like the ascendant are within 7.5 degrees of the sun on either side. They are said to be combust or eclipsed by the sun's light. And those planets are said to diminish in strength and diminish in power. So we have this Mercury in Aquarius, which would be a very, very strong mind, which would be, very quick-witted, which would be somebody who is very, very smart, actually, very high-performing, almost on the spectrum level of mental performance. Mars as well in Aquarius. I personally really enjoy Mars in Aquarius because Mars in the fixed air sign, it's kind of like taking a jet stream and just like blowing fire into it, and the oxygen feeds the fire and you just get a flamethrower. Like it's really a cool effect, Mercury in Aquarius. I like it. And the ego, the sun in Aquarius, as well as the ascendant, a core personality marker. But that sun is really taking over, and the ego eclipses the mind. And so we really need to learn how to identify who you are versus what your skills are versus what you want to do versus what you think. There's more to you than you. And that's what astrology kind of teaches us, is each planet allows us to tap into a different piece of who we are, each of them independent while working together. We'll get to your moon in a second, but your moon is very different. Very different. And so that, like, respecting and honoring, although you've done your best to try to congeal this illusion, this homunculus of, oh, I'm just an Aquarius. Like, no, you also have these pieces of you that are, although very Aquarian in nature, they are separate, they are functional, they are in some cases more important than this ego, than this sense of self, than this sense of you. Mercury in Aquarius at its best is divine inspiration. It's a sign that is so connected to the muses, right? It's beautiful, it's gorgeous. But when eclipsed by the sun of the ego and you try to take credit, the muses hate that. Yeah. And chases away that creativity. Mars in Aquarius, you know, is the tinkerer, the artist, the inventor. Um, excuse me. Yeah, there goes Instagram. So sorry, the countdown has started. If you'd like to watch the rest, YouTube it. It'll be up on YouTube later. But when Mars is eclipsed by the sun, you know, the ego is again trying to take credit. It's all about me. It's all about what I need. It's all about what I am. It's mine. And that's just not the case. Uh, you can create for the sake of creating. You can act for the sake of acting, not because it's anything to do with you, right? So that's a tricky part of this chart already. The ruler of the chart is Saturn in Virgo retrograde in the 8th house. It makes you very business savvy. It makes you very good with other people's money. However, Saturn is retrograde. That's pretty deep. That's pretty heavy. Um, let's see. Does that make sense? Ish, maybe. You'd be really good in the financial aspect. From a business perspective, you'd be really good at strategic bookkeeping. You'd be really good as an accountant, somebody who not just takes care of people's books and their possessions and their estates, you know, but somebody who can walk in and say, hey, these numbers don't match up, or hey, did you realize that you're doing this wrong, or hey, you know, if we take all this over here and we put it over here, you know, that becomes a write-off. You know, all of these kind of creative methods of not just bookkeeping but kind of lifestyling. The 8th house is the house of business, taxes, estates, and technically death. Um, and to have a Saturn in Virgo retrograde here really does bring forward a lot of those qualities, but skills, because Mercury is in mutual reception with Saturn. So I like that, and I think that does mediate the retrograde slightly. And your North Node is here, so you're really here to learn how to be that business person, learn how to appraise and value. Let's see. So now we have to talk about your moon in Taurus in the 4th. Um, so moon in Taurus is glorious. The moon is in her exaltation in Taurus. It's her favorite sign to be in. It's fabulous. Gives you a big heart. Gives you a big old mushy, soft kiss on the cheeks, kiss on the face, heart-shaped, big chest thing. Um, it really just it really just does give you a huge softy spot, right? Um, Now, one of the tricks about a moon in Taurus that I think a lot of people, especially intellectuals, um, tend to forget is if you need to emotionally unwind, right? The easiest way to do that for a moon in Taurus is good food, pleasant scents, great ambiance, fabrics that are nice, colors that are beautiful, and surrounding yourself with the worldly pleasures. Things that activate the senses, things that are beautiful and bountiful and nice and pleasing, and in some ways just make you feel like you can get that ah effect, right? And for you to put that exalted moon in the 4th house of family, I mean, that's beautiful. It just means that your home is sacred. Your home is your safe space. It's where you put all of that beauty. It's where you put all of that luxuriousness, for sure. So I like that. Um, you are just a little bit too focused on relationships. A little bit too focused on relationships. Remember This time around, you're here to learn how to play the game and master the rules of independence. You're here to have your own ideas. You're here to serve yourself. You're here to master your skills. You're here to help others, but help yourself through helping others. Yeah? You're here to put down your own roots and establish your own connection to what life is. If you put too much of your focus, too much of your emphasis in relationships, then that becomes slightly difficult. That becomes slightly needy. That becomes too deforming of that ego that we talked about. So it's a balance. The ego can't take over your other skills and can't convince you that you're the only thing that matters. Yeah. But you also can't throw yourself away to another person and say, make me whatever you want. Anything is better than what I would make myself. Ooh, ooh, that one hurt, right? So that's kind of where we're struggling, because you got Jupiter and Leo retrograde in the 7th. You're going to be attracted to somebody who's boisterous, somebody who's showboaty, somebody who's naturally going to have big britches, somebody who's just going to be able to flaunt themselves and who they are. You're going to be attracted to that quality because that's kind of what you're working on, their assuredness. But what you'll start to realize with those people is that it's all hot air, right? It's not real, and that's tricky. So we just need to be understanding of that. And that's going to be probably the biggest aspects of relationships that, oh well, and money coming from relationships, but you're really not here to master your own finances. Any spouse that you have will take care of your money just fine. But you're really here to master other people's finances, things like loans and banks and estates and things like that. The appraisal process. Yeah. Understanding what people will pay and why, taxes, that's really where the focus of your chart is, as opposed to kind of personal finance. Your home is always open to friends, which I think is really therapeutic because, Venus and Sag is just enough of that lovey-dovey mutable fire energy to break down a lot of your bad habits. I like that. Also to potentially introduce you to your mates. It would be a lot easier for you not necessarily to have a full-time relationship, but rather multiple relationships that are not necessarily all serious, but all levels of serious. Just so that you don't fall into that trap of surrendering your power over to one person. That would be one way to kind of master that healthy balance of ego, not ego. And that is it. The chart has gone cold. Cool. Alrighty, everybody. That was a whirlwind. Super fun. Maybe Jenna, who knows? So yeah, we are done with the live stream. I'm at an hour and 8 minutes. God, I'm just super chatty today. But had to make up for yesterday where we had some tech issues. Thank you all for joining, live or recorded. I will be back tomorrow. Even though it's the day after we do a live stream. Monday, Wednesday, Friday are the normal days, so I will be back tomorrow to do a live stream again with 5 more charts. And if you would like to donate your charts to the live streams, I just need birth date, place, and exact birth time. Private message me those details. I will add you to the list, message you when your chart is featured. If you would like to work one-on-one with your chart, you can always schedule a consultation via my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com, where I also have online classes if you would like to learn astrology. You can download those. They're pre-recorded. I also have a live class coming up on planetary altars on October 25th, which is just going to be a blast. That's already filling up. I'm super excited about that. I didn't realize that y'all were so interested in planetary altars, but that'll be fun. I'm going to learn how to remediate the birth chart through putting statues on tables. That's a really, really bad simplification. Don't, don't, don't do that. Anyway, until next time, we'll see you later. May the stars be ever in your favor.